Yo! Welcome back to the channel. So, UFC 306 just wrapped up at the Sphere, and this is my recap of everything that went down. So, as expected, UFC 306 was pretty cool. It was decent, and like I had kind of predicted, the reason was because of the Sphere itself, not because of any of the fights. The Sphere really stole the show, and it was the main attraction, and it's kind of what made the night that much better. Because to be honest, nobody really cared for any of the fights that were happening, maybe except for two fights, like I predicted. And that's really all that happened. So if you go watch my last couple of videos, I was talking about, one, did Merab save UFC 306? He was really the only one that was doing any kind of thing to promote his own fight. He was getting on social media. He was making jokes. He was doing all kind of antics. Got cut before the fight. Ended up taking the stitches out himself. And I was just talking about, is Merab saving this fight? Is he the one that's kind of doing all the promoting and getting the fans really hyped up for this fight? Whether it be because of his social media or because of his antics. And then the other video I made was, is Sean O'Malley a superstar, or is he just a flashy fighter? And I think we got the answer to that as well. So I think it's safe to say that both of my predictions came true, and that overall the card was decent. Starting with the main card, as far as the prelims, I still cannot name one fighter on the prelims besides Raul Rosas Jr., the teenager, and he's had the first fight on the card. So, of course, I missed that fight. Like I said, if I was in Vegas, I wouldn't even show up to this card, to this fight, until the main fight started. There was no way I was going to be sitting there watching the prelims and all of the no-name fighters that I had never heard of in my life. Now, I was right about that, because during the prelims, they had the audacity to put up 3 flat screen TVs and had the whole Sphere watching the fight on 3 flat screen TVs. I made a joke on Instagram and I said, they turned the Sphere into your local bar. So if you were at the Sphere during the prelims, you could have went to any bar in Vegas and got the same experience, and probably a much closer view of the TV, of the screen itself. Now, like I said, I can't name one fighter on this prelim other than Rosas and Irene Aldana. I've definitely heard of her before, and she is the one that suffered the most brutal cut that I've ever seen in my life. She had a cut from about the middle of her forehead all the way down to the corner of her eye, all the way down to the middle of her nose. You can see her skull looking like the bride of Chucky. Now, this brings me to my next point. What is Herb Dean ever doing when he's in the octagon? He is the most useless ref in the history of MMA. I've never seen a more incompetent, worse referee than Herb Dean. I looked in the 2 fights that were on the card that had the worst reffing were from Herbert Dean. And I just don't know how he's still able to ref. Some of his mistakes in the past have been so egregious, and I'm just like, this guy was a former fighter, couldn't make it, decided to ref, and he's still doing a bang-up job. I'm like, how do you let somebody get a cut that bad, half of their face split open, and you don't do anything about it. But when somebody gets a little nick on their corner of their eye, on the back of their head, he's calling in for the doctor. Hey, come look at this. This guy got a little cut on the corner of his eye. This guy has a little bit of blood coming from his hairline. I need a doctor to come look at this. But when somebody literally has half of their face sliced open, you're just like, oh, fight back. Fight back. You got to do something. Action. Go. And I'm like, Herb Dean is trash. Trash. Anytime I see Herb Dean's finna ref a fight, here we go again. Because it's the same thing. Now, also to that point, during the O'Malley and Merab fight, which was the main event, these boys were fighting, going at it, mixing it up, doing a little wrestling, little striking, and, jiu-jitsu, whatever you want to call it. And Herb Dean is sitting there telling them to fight the whole time. He's like, fight. He's like, go, action. I'm like, Herb Dean, what are you looking at? They are fighting. Just because you hear the crowd and they might get a little stagnant, they might not be screaming, there might not be that much action, that doesn't mean you have to insert yourself into every fight and try to act like you're the fighter and you're the main guy. So Herb Dean literally needs to just ref, and he needs to stop doing all of that extra stuff. Just ref the fight and let the fighters fight. You don't have to tell them what to do. You don't have to tell them if they're wrestling that they need to start striking, or if they're just trying to figure out distance that they need to go harder. So Herb Dean is literally terrible. He needs to go find something else to do. Fighting wasn't it, and reffing isn't it either. Now, the main card, this is when it started to pick up a little bit more. I guess they decided to ditch the whole bar setup with the 3 TVs placed in the arena for, I don't know how many people the Sphere can hold, like 12,000 maybe, 15,000. I'm not sure exactly, but they literally had 3 flat screen TVs, and that's what they were showing the prelims on. But on the main card, that's when they decided to step it up a little bit. That's when all this money that they were talking about, they put into production and $20 million and all this stuff came into play. So they started to use the whole Sphere as the backdrop, and then they were showing, I guess, short movies and different animations and things like that. And they really made the Sphere come to life during the main card. And so that part was cool, because honestly, during the prelims, I'm like, what are they doing? Like, people paid inflated prices to come watch the Sphere turn into their local pub. Like, and it was really bad at first, and I really thought that that's what they were going for. But once the main card started, that's kind of when they picked it up a little bit, and then they actually used the Sphere for what it was intended for. Now, as far as the fighters on the main card, the same with the prelims. Who are those guys? Still don't know any of those guys. I'll be honest, I can name a few of those guys, but it's like they're not any stars of the UFC. They're just regular fighters, prospects, guys that are middle of the pack fighters. So in the first fight, you had like Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Ode Osborne. And then I was like, who the hell is Ode Osborne? Who is that? But a lot of people actually thought that he got robbed. It was a good fight. And I think that Rodriguez, when they announced the scorecards, I think he was a little bit shocked to hear that he won too. I don't think that he was convinced that he actually got the win. But they gave it to him, and they gave it to him by unanimous decision, which was kind of weird. So I don't know if that was any of the judges there that maybe, because they wanted some of the Mexican fighters to win. Because up until that point, all the Mexican fighters had lost except for one, and that was the Raul Rosas, and he was the first fight on the prelims. After him, it was a shutout for all the other Mexican fighters. They lost, and I know that's not what Dana White had in mind. The UFC and all the fans that showed up to kind of watch during the celebration of Mexico, celebration of Mexican Independence Day. So, and I know when they were doing the matchmaking, I know that they were trying to give some of the Mexican fighters an advantage, or really not put them in any losing situations. Because why would you want to have a Mexican card, Mexican Independence Day, and then have all the Mexican fighters lose? So I know that's really not what the UFC wanted at all. That's not their intentions, but that's kind of how it turned out. You really can't, this is MMA, so you really don't know what's going to happen until these guys get in the octagon, in the cage, and they fight each other. It's not like boxing where you can put somebody like a well-known guy like Canelo against somebody that we've never heard of, and we know Canelo's going to win. Kind of like what happened at their fight over at the MGM on the same night. And so, but getting back to the main card, still don't know who these guys were. So the first fight on the main card, Ode Osbourne and Ronaldo Rodriguez. A lot of people think that was a controversial decision that they gave for Rodriguez. They thought Ode Osbourne should have won, but it is what it is. Now the second fight, which featured Esteban and Zellhuber, that was the fight of the night. That was the best fight on the whole card. Action. Mark Goddard, I believe, was reffing that, and he did a great job. Because at any point, Herb Dean would have screwed that up. Herb Dean would have called the fight off. The dude was not bleeding at all. He was just getting punched in a little bit, but he was still had that good head movement. So he'd take a couple shots, and then he'd duck a couple shots. And Mark Goddard did a great job of letting them boys fight all the way to the end. Esteban clearly won that fight, clearly had the better boxing, and I could tell from the first maybe 20 seconds of that fight that his hands were just way more sharp and way cleaner than Zellhuber. Now, that's kind of my indication of how a fight's going to go back, how a fight's going to turn out. Usually in the first couple of seconds, you can just determine who has the sharper hands, who has the better touch, and who's getting to the chin more. And in the first 20 seconds, I could tell that Esteban was going to start piecing this guy up. And eventually, it took till about the third round when they were letting them hands go. But you could tell that Zellhuber is still a prospect, and he's still on the way up. And somebody like Esteban, he might be ready to go up a little bit higher in a tougher competition, maybe into the top 15, and test himself out there. Because that boy has hands for sure. And so that was the fight of the night. And that was a great fight. Now, the fight after that was Diego Lopes and Brian Ortega. That was the one that I said in my last videos that I was the most excited to see. And that fight definitely did live up to the hype. And like I predicted, Diego Lopes put them hands on Brian Ortega, which was kind of not fun to see because I love Brian Ortega. I think he's a great fighter, and he's just a good person. You know what I mean? You could tell he's just like a humble dude, and the guy really doesn't get in anybody's business. He's not really out here talking trash. He keeps it really professional, and he's just overall, he's a good dude. And Brian Ortega is definitely invited to the carne asada. So I know I'm not Mexican, so he's invited to the cookout. Brian Ortega is always invited to the cookout. That's a good guy right there. But Diego Lopes, he's just too good everywhere. I knew Brian Ortega had really good wrestling, really good jiu-jitsu, but it's a shame that these fighters can't really see like where their advantages are and where their disadvantages are. Because anybody who knows fighting knows Diego Lopes has way better striking than Brian Ortega. His hits way harder. Diego Lopes hits like a truck. Somebody like Brian Ortega could have stood in there and tried to box maybe for like the first 30 seconds. But after that, after you get rocked early, you should know it's submission time. But the thing is, Diego Lopes is just good all around. He has really good striking, and he has really good wrestling and jiu-jitsu. So it's kind of like no matter what, Brian Ortega was going to get canceled out. So, and Diego Lopes did put those hands on him, hit him with some hard shots early, rocked him. But Ortega's just tough as nails. Ortega's not going to quit. He's not going to give up. I've seen Ortega take a pounding like that and still end up winning the fight. So anytime Brian Ortega's fighting, you know that the fight's never a conclusion until that bell rings or until the ref stops it. Brian Ortega is always a threat to get a submission, but when he's going up against a guy like Diego Lopes that has equally as good of wrestling and ground game, it's really hard to kind of have your way with a guy like that. So Diego Lopes did what he had to do. He did what he was supposed to do, and he did what everybody thought he was going to do, which was just dominate from start to finish. And I know he wanted the knockout, but like I said, Brian Ortega is one of the toughest fighters in the UFC, and you're not just going to knock that guy out like it's nothing. You know what I mean? Especially if it's not a 5-round fight. I think this was a 3-round fight. So eventually that ended up working in Ortega's favor. He didn't have to kind of, take that for the whole 5 rounds. But Diego Lopes is deserving of a top 5 guy. He is in the top 5 now. So his next fight will either be a title eliminator or it'll be for the belt. And who wouldn't want to see that? I believe he's in the same division as Ilia Topuria. So if he's not, because I know Ilia has some options. He's fighting Max Holloway coming up here in a few months. So we'll see how that goes. But Diego Lopes also has some options and also has some really good fights coming his way. Now, the next fight was the Valentina and Alexa Grasso title fight. And this fight ended up as expected. Go back and watch my last videos. I said we're basically watching a rematch to the rematch to the rematch. We've already seen the fight before. We've actually seen it again. Now we're going to see it again. And this probably was the least entertaining fight out of all the other previous ones. Valentina Shevchenko used her wrestling, and Alexa Grasso had no takedown defense at all. And Valentina did a lot of lay and pray. She just tried to get her on the ground and keep her there. She didn't do anything when she was on the ground, didn't have any significant strikes on the ground, didn't have any ground and pound, and basically got her to the ground, and they were just playing ground wrestling. You know what I mean? Alexa Grasso had a couple of submission attempts. It looks like she was going to get maybe an arm bar here and there, maybe a triangle or whatever the other one is. A guillotine. Maybe it looked like she was going to get a guillotine, but it never ended up happening. And Valentina, pretty much every time the bell rang for the round to start, she went for a takedown. She was not trying to give us a good fight. She was not trying to entertain the fans. She was just trying to get her belt back by any means necessary, which, isn't the worst thing that a fighter can do. At the end of the day, the objective and the mission is to get a win, which is what she did. She won the fight. But like I said in my last videos, nobody was excited to see this fight. Nobody was anticipating seeing this fight. This fight didn't live up to any kind of expectations because honestly, there were no expectations to this fight. So that was it. And then there is the main card, which was Sean O'Malley versus Merab. And like I said in my previous videos, I said it would not be totally out of the question if Merab came in and won this fight because unlike Chito Vera, who just stands there and was like a human punching bag, getting punched to the face, elbowed, knee to the face, and had no other threat as far as a takedown, as far as grappling, Merab was the total opposite. We knew, like I said in my previous videos, that Merab was going to get O'Malley in some uncomfortable positions, and that's what he did. Oh, he had him against the cage. He had him on the ground. O'Malley looked just like a twig that couldn't do anything, swing in the air and miss. Every time he swung and missed, Merab knew what to do. It was time for that takedown, and that's what he did. Executed his game plan to a T, to perfection. And Merab honestly saved the card. Look at my last videos that I posted. Merab saved UFC 306. O'Malley is not a superstar. Like I said, and I didn't even say it really. I asked the question, is he a superstar? I said I think he's a star, but I don't think he's a superstar at all. He has not fought any tough guys at all. The toughest guy that he fought was probably Aljamain Sterling, and some people would say that that fight got stopped early because the ref, who was Mark Goddard, you know, usually he's a good ref, but he did stop that fight. They were in Boston. It was a huge O'Malley crowd. Maybe the UFC just wanted to make O'Malley the star that night, wanted to make him a champion that night. Mark Goddard stopped the fight a little bit prematurely, considering how this girl, Aldana, had a Bride of Chucky cut on her whole face. Nobody stopped the fight. Blood leaking everywhere. And when O'Malley fought Aljo, he hit him with a lot of shots, but he was still in the fight. Aljo was. He didn't go to sleep. He wasn't leaking blood everywhere. He had a little cut, but I thought this was MMA, especially for the men. You let them go. Now, I understand for the women, you want to, you know, they want to keep their face looking pretty. You don't want them to get a huge, looks like the girl just got chainsawed to the face. You know what I mean? But Herb Dean didn't have no problem letting that fight continue. So I think there does need to be a little bit more consistency in the reffing, and the judging, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, Merab did what he needed to do to win the belt. I am happy for Merab. I think Merab is more entertaining than Sean O'Malley outside of the cage. Now, inside of the cage, you could say Merab has boring fights. But I'll tell you, this fight last night at the Sphere was definitely not boring at all. And I think if Merab can do that, he can mix in striking with the grappling. I think he'll be an even bigger star than he is now, like I predicted. So, and then also, other than the fights, like I was saying earlier, the Sphere did kind of come to life during the main card. There were some good videos in there, you know what I mean? And it just looked cool, you know what I mean? If you were there, a lot of people were saying that, imagine if you were there, you were on psychedelics. Like, that would have probably been the best night of your life, the best experience you ever had tripping or whatever the case may be. But it was cool just to see the Sphere, because I've never seen it myself. And just to see it during a UFC event, that was pretty cool. I do think they should do another fight there. That would be really kind of unfortunate if that was the only one that they did and they never returned, kind of like Dana White has been saying this whole buildup. But like I say never. Maybe Dana White does step down, like I did say in my very last video. Go check that out if you have it. Is it time for Dana White to go? But if Dana White does end up stepping down from the UFC, maybe whoever takes over, maybe they'll throw another event in the Sphere and just try to do that again. But my one question is, what was Dana White talking about finding some Easter eggs? What is this? A wild goose chase? Is this Easter Sunday? Dana, you know that it is September. It is not April. What are you talking about finding some Easter eggs for? That's what I'm talking about. Is Dana White slightly out of his mind? Is he getting Alzheimer's? Is he like pre-dementia? Or was he just saying that if you find some Easter eggs in the Sphere, you'll win $25,000 as like a bribe to get people to buy tickets because he knows the ticket sales were low and most of the people there were like celebrities. They probably got in for free. And that's probably the only way that he can get people to buy the ticket with such a horrendous card, as if he bribes the people. Hey guys, why don't you guys look at the videos and find some hidden Easter eggs? I'm going to tell you, I was watching those videos. I didn't see one Easter egg, and I wasn't looking for an Easter egg. Who was going to be watching that huge production with, you know, the Sphere lit up and like, you know, in its glory, and you're sitting there like, oh, I got to find some Easter eggs. Oh, I wonder where they hid the Easter eggs at. Dana, this is not Easter Sunday, buddy. Man, I swear, just, I don't know what Dana White be thinking sometimes. I really don't. And if you did watch my last video, I said I used to be a huge fan of Dana White maybe 3 years ago. Because, you know, once COVID started, I think that's when Dana White went crazy. I think that's when he lost his marbles, when COVID started. And he didn't know what he was going to do. He's always saying, I was the first one to bring back sports during COVID. You know, I was the first one to bring back sports during COVID. And he's always like, you know, just talking about that time period. And I think that's officially when Dana White fell off of his rocker, or when he needs to get a rocker. Because ever since then, I really can't stand Dana White. He's kind of insufferable. I don't want to, you know, talk too much trash because, you know, I still like the UFC. I still think that, you know, he's doing a decent job of running it. You know, I got a few shares of, you know, the UFC stock. So, you know, I want it to do good. You know, I want the UFC to keep rising and keep climbing. I think the Sphere was good in helping its profile, but I think overall, I think Dana White might need to lessen his role a little bit. Let somebody start taking over the press conferences. Let somebody start taking over, doing all the weigh-ins and stuff and the face-offs. Just, we might need another face of the UFC because we know Dana White is getting old. So that's just what it is. He's the president. I think all presidents should be a little bit younger. We don't need anybody that's like out of touch with reality. The dude's so rich, he's out of touch with reality. He's so rich, he don't want to pay his fighters. But hey, maybe that's another video for another day. That's all I really got. Let me know what you guys thought about UFC 306 at the Sphere. Did it live up to the hype? Did it live up to the expectations? And do you guys want to see another fight there in the future? Do you guys think Merab is a star? Or anything else you guys think might be relevant? Let me guys know. I'll see you guys on the next video. And hopefully we got some cool stuff coming up for you. Got some news. But I'll catch you guys next time. All right. Deuces.